that and only that brought about national repentance. A friend told me from back east, he said, Pastor John, I hear it in your voice, you're becoming discouraged. Rainey wrote me, and he said, don't become discouraged, my brother. He said, it's what you're feeling there in Southern California is all over the country. He said, it's doing no good. He said, the very people that I was friends with, went to church with, have all turned against me. And he said, your voice is what we listen to on that computer when we get in the pits. And he said, and you sound like you're joining us down here. And I wrote him back and I said, man, do you know that when a nation affirms a president more popular than Jesus Christ blessed this country, the United States of America? God blessed us, and we affirm a dude 48 years old who's nothing but a commie in disguise. He's a communist. And he's going to tax this nation till there's nothing left, because he was put in there by the powers to be, to do it. And most sinners would do anything to make their families rich. So Hosea said that doom would come to God's people who would not fulfill their prophetic destiny. That's what the book of Hosea is all about. He said doom is coming to this nation because they will not fulfill the destiny that God had called them to do. Keep in mind the big idea, church. What do we do when Christians fall? When Christians fail? When Christians shame Christ? When Christians bring dishonor to the calling in their lives? See, God's going to do the so-called professing Christians the same way that he does his so-called professing children back in the time of Hosea. Do Christians have a particular destiny to fulfill? Pastor Sean was talking about it. And you know, I think that that's where it all meant. The Christians that I've been speaking to, and I will not mention names here because some of you know these people. They're telling me how they're working their lives. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I'm asking one particular question. What in the world, what are you going to leave as a legacy for Christianity? I share something with you. My son-in-law company had to send him to London last week on a business trip. My son-in-law works for one of the largest firms. I won't even mention it, but he's their head accountant. And he went to England, and I said, how was it? He said, Dad, I only had 2 or 3 hours when I got off the plane. He said the whole week was meetings, staff meetings, working. And he said that he had presented this proposal that he had been working on. And he said, I've never been in a place like that. I said, what do you mean? He said, rich people were there. He said, rich people took me to dinner. He said, I ate in the best hotels. Food and drink and everything that I've never seen. Powerful people. And I think he said, what did he tell me? He said a hotel room per day. I want to get the cost right. $350 a day for a hotel room no larger than my living room. Just that room and a little bathroom. $350. And they flew him first class back to the country and all that, but he was telling me that he presented his project, and there was a woman there that was opposing his project and trying to tear it down. And he said, Dad, what I did, he says, I remember what I was taught by my family and how to be godly and how not to go under the table and strike dirty because they're playing dirty. And when you're in circles like that, they play hard ball. They play hard ball to kill you. And he said that his contract was one that was taken. And he said, the only thing that I could say is that God was with me because there was absolutely nothing that you can do. And I just told him, I said, you know, it's good to hear you say that. because not too many people put God in anything these days. It's all about their own human ingenuity, because that is what humanism does. Whereas back in the time of Hosea, the nation had fallen into idolatry, we have fallen into humanistic mindsets. Humanism, where we need to come back to God. Look at what our role is in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. I don't know whether you ever looked at that. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. You can find out immediately what your role is, why God called you. This is why God called every Christian on the face of the earth since 2,000 years ago. Paul writes to the church at Corinth and he says, therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were entreating through us. We beg you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. Now let me ask you a question. You think the church is saying that today? Do you think the church is demonstrating this today? Do you think that we are demonstrating this in how we live? I know I don't. I know I've blown it so many times. When I see this verse, I can't say, well, I'm a pastor, so I'm an ambassador. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that you're an ambassador and you're on duty, like me, 24 hours a day, entreating people, begging them on the behalf of Christ to become reconciled to God. We spend most of our time arguing with our friends about denominational practices, when we should try to get them reconciled to God. So the Apostle Paul uses timely words. But in Hosea chapter 14, verse 4, our keen and key text, it appears that the Lord is taking the initiative just as he does today in our lives. He says, I will heal their apostasy. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned away from them. See, in verse 4, the Lord is saying, I see what you're doing. I'll turn away from it. But I'm telling you that there's such a lack of consciousness of God that he isn't going to turn away from our sin until we acknowledge our sin. Now, this is going to be a very difficult message, hopefully not for those of us here, because we're here. But if it gets a little difficult for you, I'm going to show you how to resolve it before you get to that point in the message. Just bow your head. Don't say anything to anybody. Talk to God right there in your pew where you are, like I had to while I was putting this together. Because I'm going to tell you, it is totally impossible for any of us in this room to get through this sermon without admitting that on at least one of these many points, we are guilty. We are guilty. And it's a heck of a thing, because when you're a preacher and you got to put things together like this and preach it, and then you see yourself all messed up,